Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Coffee and Conversation right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and today I am joined by the lovely Kerry Allerton. How are you?
Good morning, Ria. I'm good, thank you.
Good. Now, those of you may remember back in the fall of 2019, Kerry came on board with us to chat about visas, entering the Schengen area in order to work, compliance, etc. And I decided to have her back again today to talk a little bit more about those issues because it seems, now that the season is heating up in the Mediterranean and there is a little bit of shakiness in regards to the Brexit situation, there's been news coming, from all sorts of areas, and everyone has a different opinion on what to do. We saw a story the other day that Holland is doing a certain something, and so how are people going to negotiate this? Is there a time frame that they have to figure things out, or is it just a sit and wait pattern?
Well, I think kind of something definitely at least the last few years is something that Evolution we've always been quite on top of or proactive when we talk to our crew about, is just saying you just need to ask the right questions to the right people. And non-Schengen crew, so non-European residents visiting Europe, they need to be aware that as a crew member traveling into Europe to work on a vessel, you need to be knowing what your rights are as a non-European, that you all have restricted passports. So coming into Europe, there is a restriction, and it's just finding out how that works. Whether you need a Schengen visa, like we discussed before, if you're coming from the Philippines or South Africa, there's different kinds of Schengen visas that you can apply for. Then you're granted different kinds of Schengen visas with different stays. So what does it mean when you've got a multiple entry visa, or what does it mean when you've got a single entry visa, and what if it's 10 days or 90 days? And then, like we discussed last time, there's the Americans, Australians who don't need visas to come in because there's an understanding between the countries, but they're still restricted to a certain time, which is 90 days. And as we know, crew members are often in Europe for longer. So what does that mean in terms of how do you use those 90 days most efficiently? What are your rights? What are not your rights? And like we said before, it's a question of asking the right person at the right time, and that still stands now. And we, even though things were very relaxed 3 or 4 years ago, and a lot of crew didn't really know and weren't asking the questions, we were always saying, listen, you don't have anything to worry about, but just be aware that as a crew member, you're responsible for your passport at the end of the day, and you're responsible for that border crossing, even if you're on the boat and the captain has your passports or the purser has your passports. He's going to give that passport back to you, and anything that happens when you leave the boat is going to be a consequence that you live with. So it's about educating crew to ask the captain the right questions. Do I need to be stamped in? Have I been stamped in? Do I need a shore pass? That's what we've been doing the last few years, and unfortunately the last 2 or 3 years we've seen more grey areas come up and more questions being asked, with the potential maybe our borders closed. What if they're closed temporarily? I think it was back in November 2016 when the first incident came up with the shootings in Paris, and the France, they didn't close their borders, but they were doing passport control at airports and at train stations coming in and out of the country just for a couple of days. And that really kind of brought to us that, it just takes something like that to happen. And crew need to know what questions can be asked and what are their rights and what do they need to be doing. What happens if in the future this becomes more prevalent? And now we're unfortunately at that stage where I think crew are realizing they need to know what could potentially happen in the future, and what do I need to know as a crew member, or as a crew member on holiday in Europe, or as a crew member arriving to a vessel or leaving a vessel. So I think nobody knows what the future holds at the moment, but the crew need to be asking the right questions to the right people, and that's essentially the message that we're giving.
So you are based out of the Evolution offices in Spain. Is there the possibility that each country will have a different sort of interpretation of the law once 2021 arrives?
To be honest, it's even the case now in our experience. Even though there's one rule book for the Schengen zone, so in theory, Germany, Italy, France, they all have the same rule book, but we find that port authorities tend to interpret it slightly different. And so, like you say, my experience personally is limited to Spain, but we have crew coming from France and Italy explaining that they're given shore passes and they come here and they're expected to be given shore passes to be able to move around, assuming, which is a kind of a fair enough thought in theory, because it's border free, it's all Europe. But in Italian ports or in Corsica, they'll react and they'll have a different protocol than they do in Tarragona, for example. And even between Ibiza, Tarragona and Barcelona, we have different protocols in place. So part of our team in Evolution, each person responsible for that service in the office knows and advises what they need in that port, which sometimes is a bit of a shock to captains and crew, because they said, hey, I just came from Barcelona, I didn't need to do all of this, it's still the same country. But there are different interpretations. So that's what we're finding already. It's nothing new, to be honest.
Well, and I mean, it does change, because you could be on a certain visa from the same country as your fellow crew member, with a different visa, with, your yacht could have a certain flag. You're not, there's so many different variables that go into it. So making a question on a social media site, a blanket question, I'm South African and I'm in Spain, or I'm South African and I'm in France, there is no sort of quick and easy answer straight across the board as far as visas go.
Yeah, it is. And it's always best, we say, do a little bit of research, find out what answers are being given out there. But at the end of the day, is to talk to your local representative, which quite often for crew members is a port agent. They'll have a relationship with the immigration office already. They'll know what's required. They'll have had incidences or situations which don't really seem very straightforward in the past, and they can advise accordingly. So when a crew member comes to me in Barcelona, I'll explain what we need there, and then say, oh great, that's good, well, we're going to Ibiza in July, so we'll just do the same thing there. And I'm not in a position to advise. I'll say, listen, I'm going to let you talk to Chisco in Ibiza, because he knows them better and he'll be able to advise you more specifically to save time and save money and save the worry and the stress. Because as we were talking earlier, crew are starting to worry about it, and in a way that's a good thing. So crew are realizing they need to be asking these questions, to be a bit more conscious. And yeah, you said just now, I think you mentioned in your introduction that there was something online about Holland, the Holland port authorities, and for the new builds there. I recently saw that this week as well. So it's going to be very location specific in terms of how to manage it. It's going to be a big task for crew and captains and pursers as well, because they need to be able to logistically organize themselves as well. And I'm really hoping that it won't come to the case where captains and crew will be less willing or less eager to recruit certain nationalities if this is going to get more complicated. But and again, it's not time to panic, really. It's time to be asking questions and educating ourselves. But any changes that come in, hopefully we'll have a bit of time and a bit of forewarning to prepare for it. Actually, I was talking to some crew in Germany at the moment, and it's the long-term client of Evolution with some Filipino crew on board. And as we know, Filipino is a bit more tricky than other nationalities. And she told me that the German port authority near where the shipyards are in Bremen have started issuing actually residence visas for temporary residence visas for the Schengen crew, which was news to me. But this is how the port authorities have the rule book, but then they're making whatever works for them. And presumably there's so many crew that come through Germany. And again, when you're on a new build, it's usually a long-term project. You could be there for months and months on end. And so maybe that's a reaction from having crew coming and going and having to deal with so many different situations where crew are staying long-term. And in theory, the general rule is that there's restrictions, but they can understand that it's a different situation that applies to these crew, because they're there because their contract requires them to be there. They're working. They have an organisation responsible for their welfare, responsible for their well-being, for their accommodation, for their medical. They know that they're taken care of and they're in a kind of guarded situation, and they've created a different protocol to cope with that. So that was news for me, and really good. I mean, I think what I was told is that the temporary residence visa, as soon as the vessel launches, that residency visa is closed, and they have to revert back to the regular Schengen visa that they have or need to get in their passport. But that is a really good example of how there's no consistency whatsoever, and I think there's going to be even less so as countries maybe take it into their own hands, and ports even take it into their own hands to figure out what's going to work best for them.
Well, and I think straight across the board, though, port authorities do recognize that having these crews ashore and having these, yachts come into their marinas and their ports is a benefit for the local economy. So they're going to do their best to make sure that that continues to happen, because if they make it more difficult, then they're going to see a loss of that income.
Sometimes I'd like to think so, but sometimes it's the opposite. I know in Ibiza, for example, where obviously there's a lot of resources coming in through yachting. Ibiza is very strict, actually, and like I said, that's not my area, but I believe the police actually like to visit the vessels themselves in person and check everything, even when their guests on board. There's a lot more laborious procedure there. When you just thought vessels in Ibiza are coming for 2 or 3 days and then leaving. The crew rarely, the nature of the reason for being there is the crew are working and they're staying on board and they're not going anywhere. They're busy working, and they'll be gone in 3 or 4 days. And yet it's actually quite a laborious process and quite a lot of work, both for our office and for the captains and crew, to tie all that up and to actually have the immigration authorities coming on board and embarking and disembarking with guests on board. So that's like a little bit contrary to what you'd expect, like you just pointed out. And again, we just come back to this idea of talking to the local specialists and saying, what do I need to do? Give me a heads up so when I get there's no surprises.
Well, and realistically, it doesn't cost, when you look at the big scheme of things, it doesn't cost you that much money to go through a professional, get it done correctly, because the alternative would be to not do it correctly and lose your job and be sent home to your home country and have to reapply for all the process all over again.
Yeah. Or even, having fines imposed on. I mean, it hasn't got to that stage, but could it get to that? Well, yeah, we have to think that maybe it could. That could there be fines imposed on the vessel? Not only are there going to be consequences for the crew member, like you say, that could be even for the owner of the boat. If they're missing a few crew, they have to pay for the repatriation of crew members. So you're right. That's another thing, and that's obviously the essence of what we as Evolution, as any port agent is we're there because we're trying to make life easier and more and smoother and more pleasant experience, and the people have the right information at the right time. Of course, there is an expense that comes with that, but we like to think that actually it's a good investment because it saves you get the right information at the right time, and you can carry on with what you need to be concentrating on, which is the good operation of your vessel and the enjoyment of your owner.
I suppose it'd be like Googling for a headache and finding out you're going to die in 2 hours. I mean, that's sort of the same type of response you would end up getting, and it would probably be completely wrong.
Yeah, well, sometimes as well, people, I can understand there may be a slightly negative image for a yacht agent. The word agent itself is something I'm not particularly comfortable with because it seems to kind of lock you in a little box, but actually sometimes it can be a shortcut to getting the right result. That's essentially what we're here for, and how we've thrived and as Evolution at least gotten to the position that we have, that people are starting to recognize that the nature of yachting is getting so much more complicated and more exciting and more advanced. There's so many more elements to it these days, and having the right professional information is definitely a bonus.
Well, and when a company works in certain areas for, a lengthy period of time, they also do tend to get the right connections. And I don't care what industry you're in or what business you're in, having the right connections is always a good thing. It does sometimes cut down on a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, it does. And when you're talking about a luxury or the super yacht industry where the standards are so high and expectations are so high, standards are so high, the levels are so high up there already. I think people need to question themselves: do I take shortcuts, and do I try and figure this out when I can reach out and get the answer straight away? And yeah, that's something definitely to consider when you're managing an asset which is so valuable, and what's at stake if you make the wrong decisions.
For sure. Well, you guys have some absolutely amazing and exciting news that has just happened. I've been following, some teasers out there in social media land, new things coming soon, and then you just had this major announcement yesterday. So what's going on?
Yeah, we did. It's very exciting. Like you say, it's been something that's been brewing, or we've been working on for a long time now. But yesterday, Evolution Agents rebranded. We're now called Evolution Yachting. We've merged with some other companies, and we are now one company, one family called Evolution Yachting. We're not just in Spain now, we're actually present throughout the Mediterranean as a much more comprehensive service for our clients. We've got some great people on board. The brand Evolution Yachting is actually the brainchild or the vision of a gentleman called Stefano Tusiti, who's very well known in the industry. He's been yachting a long time. He founded Aquaria Yachting in Italy. He's from Venice in 2017, I think, and had this vision of creating a global yacht agency, a very big, ambitious project. And part of that project was acquiring Evolution. He's also acquired a company called G&K Yachting in Greece. And then with these two major acquisitions, he's also opened offices in France, Croatia, Albania, Corfu, Turkey, I believe, Croatia. We're pretty much everywhere, all the prime cruising destinations for yachts. And we're all one family now called Evolution Yachting. Obviously, we're very happy to be bringing the name Evolution with us. And it's really super exciting times. We've come a long way in 2 years. Like I said before, he's very ambitious, and he's not going to stop there. We're definitely planning on expanding even further afield this summer. We're focusing on the med season, obviously, and we're giving ourselves up to be ready for that. And that's it. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It's having key people in key places, and all our offices have local people there who've been working there for a long time, who have the connections. They're established. They know yachting. They know the procedures. They know the requirements, and they know the people, and they speak the language. So everybody in every office is local to that area, and bringing a wealth of information to the group. And the idea is that clients are not just passing from one office to the next. They're actually remaining within our group, and we'll be taking care of them in a manner that I think hasn't been achieved so far, to make sure there's that continuity of service, that recognition, the comfort of being with a recognized brand, a recognized company that's well established wherever we go. Yes, we have a new logo. Yes, we have a new name, and we have new passion and a new dynamism as well. But actually, essentially, when you arrive, you're speaking to people on the ground who've been there a long time, who are established, and have the right answers and have the right information for you. So yeah, you're right. It's a very exciting time for us.
Nice. So it just sounds like it's just going to get better and better. And now, obviously, you're expanded, straight across Europe, and it's just getting bigger. So you're able to help people with so much more in so many more areas.
Yeah, and the idea is we still try and keep that personability. Customer service is definitely at the forefront. We're trying to do something with. What we're trying to do is, as we've seen yachts and the yachting industry, with the technology, the design, everything's coming up to the next level and getting so much more sophisticated and advanced. And what Stefano saw was the possibility that we need to match that. As the people on the ground who are providing that support, everything's so much more demanding, so much more intense, more fast-paced, and you need people on the ground who can keep up with that and who can match that. So that's his vision. He wants to bring the service up to the next level, the whole experience of yachting to be at the next level, both for the owners and for the crew.
Well, it all sounds really exciting. And do you know what? I'd really like to maybe revisit this whole situation in about 6 months or 8 months in regards to Brexit as things come through. If there is information that you feel crew need to know, could you please reach out to us so that we can spread that information straight across the network? Because I think there are quite a few nervous people out there from what I see. You know, as I was saying, one of the #1 top crew when you're looking at percentages is the British population. You know, there's a lot of Brits that are crew.
I didn't know that. Obviously, as a Brit myself, I'm not a crew member anymore, but it is something that I'm keeping an eye on, and definitely these kind of things are going to be something that we as Evolution Yachting are going to be on top of. And actually, I didn't mention, but one of the exciting things about our news structure is we're going to be sharing a lot of information between our companies, so between our offices. We have systems so where we can share information not only about what's going on in different countries, but what's going on, what our clients need and what they want. So when if there is certain issues or concerns with captains and crew as they're moving around, then each office will know that we need to be dealing with that and addressing that with our clients. So information sharing is it's going to be a big part of our new policy and our service.
Brilliant. Well, we're looking forward to it. Thank you, Kerry, so much for your time. It's been Kerry Allerton from Evolution Yachting.
Yep.
This is what it's now called. Wonderful. Well, I will expect you to send me your brand new logo so I could do a little story about you guys as well.
I'd be very pleased to, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you again. This has been Kerry Allerton, Evolution Yachting. You've been listening to Coffee and Conversation right here on Yachting International Radio. Tune in again for another episode.